it seems like Michigan might be coming into this year looking to, I don't want to say protect guys because you can't play scared either. Right. But you have all this depth. You got to use it to your advantage. And one of those guys you're hoping will be at full steam at the end of the year is Blake Corum. Right. Not having him last year, losing him at the tail end of what was a Heisman level campaign. Right. You go on, you beat Ohio State, you win the Big Ten without him. But man, I think especially against what TCU was doing, I think having Corum would have been a major deal. So he updated his status recently, again, on a video with the 33rd team. Josh has an article on our site with a link to that if you haven't seen it. But one of the things that stuck out to me was Blake basically said he's ready to go, that he's at 98%. And the only reason he's not at 100 is he hasn't been cleared for contact yet. He hasn't taken those first few hits, right? Yeah. We've talked about that a little bit, like that last little mental aspect of getting hit again and making cuts and trusting that. But do you think hearing Blake say that, right, and assuming he's going to get cleared when he's cleared, which should be early into fall camp, and he's participating, do you see any lag in him kind of coming back and running? Do you think Michigan's going to play it easy with him, or is Corum going to pick up where he left off, if you will, in terms of production from last year?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because I think you don't really need Blake Corum these first couple of weeks. I mean, even you can make an argument into Rutgers with their Big Ten opener. So yeah, I mean, I don't think they're just going to be like, hey, we're not going to play you. I mean, it's Blake Corum wants to play. I mean, you can't just keep Blake Corum off the field, but at the same time, you don't want to just say, all right, go have fun, ease into it, or not ease into it and just go right in and something terrible happens. But, I think his level of, fitness and how he handles the contact, I think it'll determine a lot during camp. I mean, because these guys hit each other in camp. You're not playing two-hand touch in camp. You're actually, you're hitting each other and you're running structured scrimmages and all that kind of stuff. So he'll get that hit stuff out of the way a little bit during camp. But, I mean, there's nothing compared to real live reps in games. So, do I see a scenario where Michigan kind of limits him a little bit? Yes and no. I guess it just kind of, you can go into a game with a plan and then that plan can get totally thrown out the window in the first 5 minutes, So I'm sure there's probably a pitch count, so to speak, on Corum, and there might even be a pitch count on Donovan too, because we can't forget about him having off-season surgery too. So both guys are going to be ready. I mean, that's not a concern for either guy. It's not a concern. They'll be ready to go. But again, with the quality of Michigan's non-conference schedule, you almost don't really need them at that point. I mean, yeah, you'll play them as much as you can, but at halftime, these might not necessarily be games and you can just sit them. But at the same time, we're talking about Blake Corum coming off a year where he probably would have won the Heisman Trophy if he was healthy. And these guys want their stats. Donovan Edwards has been very vocal about wanting to go to the NFL after this season. So, and yeah, you're not going to win the Heisman in the first 4 weeks of the season. And you're also not going to be a first round draft pick in the first 4 games of the season as well. But you want to create tape for professional teams to look at. So there's also that aspect too, where you want to give these guys the touches they deserve, but also preserve them for down the stretch, which Michigan didn't have that luxury of doing last year. So, getting over that mental hurdle of taking that first contact to the knee is going to be big. And I don't think that's going to be a concern for Corum at all. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting scenario here because, I mean, unfortunately, Michigan has a lot of depth at running back too. So they can afford to get some guys out there. I mean, a Ben Hall, I could see having a lot of extra snaps, CJ Stokes, even Tavi Dunlap, could get some more carries too. So it's an interesting scenario because you've got two guys who, want to have jokingly said during the offseason that they want to split the Heisman Trophy together. So it's going to be hard to keep those kind of guys off the field who want to play. But at the same time, you also want to have these guys available at the end of the year. So it's an interesting dynamic that we probably won't really get an answer to until, right around the season opener, because it all depends on what, fall camp looks like for these guys. But yeah, I mean, there's going to be opportunities for these guys, but we'll see. We'll see how it all develops and how these two guys can work together, because Michigan has to work on the pass game too. So who knows? Maybe that opens up an opportunity to sling it around the yard a little more. So a lot of moving parts, but it's an interesting argument to have for sure.
I do like their depth at running back better this year. I think Stokes is going to remind people why he was so hyped last year and have a good bounce back. I say bounce back. He finished with more rushing yards as a freshman, 5 yards per carry, than Corum or Edwards did when they were freshmen, right? Yeah. So he's arguably ahead of track when you go with that. But I think the thing that's got to change is just the total carries, right? So we talked about the non-conference schedule. Last year, Corum had 13, 9, and 12. Five of his 12 carries against UConn were touchdowns. Pretty impressive. But then we get into Big Ten schedule, 30, 29, 25, 28, 33, 20 against Rutgers was his lowest, 28, and then 18 in the first half against Illinois.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It's a lot. Yeah, for sure. So I think that's where it's got to happen. I think, and in the past we've seen it, where maybe 20s is marked, 25 in a big situation, whatever it might be. But you talked about the pitch count. I mean, if they need him to run because Edwards is hurt or whatever, but I wonder if that's just going to naturally happen from success. So if the deep ball is connecting better and they're scoring more, Edwards is healthy, is Corum maybe just naturally not going to get too many carries because of the pace of game potentially? Or are we going to see what I think was kind of frustrating in years past, where it was like the constant rotation of running backs? Remember, like guys wouldn't even they'd have one great carry and then they were off the field, right? Like, how do you think is Michigan going to manage this with their own success on the field? Or are we going to see something more deliberate in terms of rotation like that?
Yeah, I mean, during the early season, the first couple of games of the non-conference schedule, I'm sure you could probably make an argument where there's going to be more deliberate rotation, just because they can afford it. I mean, these games could be over by halftime, so that you've got you just got.
I mean, that's the goal, right? Just blow them out of the water so you can get everybody else right.
Yeah, I mean, it could be a very similar situation to what we saw last year where, I mean, obviously there's not a Cade versus JJ type of situation where you got to get guys snaps, but, there's going to be an opportunity for a guy like Davis Warren to come in there and get more snaps. And, Jack Tuttle will also be involved too. So then you can also change the rotation, with the running backs, as well as getting more offensive linemen in there, as well as getting more wide receivers in there. So I think it would be beneficial for Michigan to not just get rotation at the running back spot, but, get some rotation everywhere else, because, a lot of these guys are going to be gone after this year. And the more experience you can get for everyone, as much as you can, regardless of the situation, the better off these guys are going to be long-term. So, yeah, I mean, I think even outside of the running back position, I think getting a rotation and a purposeful rotation will be important. And yeah, because you're likely going to lose Corum and Edwards at the end of the year. And, you're going to have a Jordan Marshall come in who's going to come in and compete right away for snaps. But you're going to have guys who get experience too. The Ben Halls, the Cole Cabanas, the CJ Stokes, the guys that are on, in the running back room. So, yeah, I think having like a purposeful rotation in these first, 4 games, and even if they're lucky down the road during Big Ten play too, they'll have some opportunities where you can trot some guys out there in some not necessarily key moments, but non-garbage time, meaningful snaps. So, yeah, the more experience you can give your guys, the better it's going to be long-term. And, the more that they can show that, they can handle a bigger role when their number's called.
I think the one thing that's going to be interesting to note, I kind of gave our guy Brock Heilig some crap when we were talking about impact players with Michigan, and he had Corum really far down the list because he expected him to get less carries and arguably not be the same version of himself, right? And one thing he said in that interview, Corum, that is, was he's added muscle, which is kind of hard to believe.
Yeah, right.
The guy's an absolute monster for 5'8", 5'9", or whatever. But he said he's added a little weight. It's good weight, it's muscle, and he feels faster. So if we're imagining a Blake Corum that gets comfortable with contact and gets to what he considers 100% coming out of fall camp, and we saw this with Ronnie Bell last year. Ronnie Bell said the same thing.
Yeah,
he felt stronger and faster, and he looked better last year. If Corum is better this year, whether it's breaking more tackles or, you know, whatever with strength, getting even more push off of his leg because of strength. And the last little piece that he seemed to lack was that final top end speed, right?
Yep.
Where he could get away from guys, but the full breaker, if he adds that, he might not have to play a ton because he's just putting up so many stats in that first half anyway. But yeah, a better Blake Corum is a crazy thing to try and imagine.
Right. Well, a faster Blake Corum too, because you know, the funny part is that he could get run down. You know, that's kind of the thing. Like, that was his major gripe, is that he didn't necessarily have that top end speed to totally break away from guys, but he was so shifty that he could find an opening and just be gone. So if you're talking about him adding speed, I mean, that's just another level that he's going to reach. And the thing is too, with Corum, is like, his knee injury wasn't because like he didn't have, you know, the muscle or the structure around his legs or whatever. I mean, it was just an unfortunate hit that hit him in the unfortunate spot at the right time. I mean, it was a freak hit. It wasn't an overuse issue. It wasn't, you know, a non-contact injury that you could blame as being overused, but it was just a freak hit that just unfortunately hit him at the right place at the right time to do the damage that it did. But yeah, I think you find that a lot with guys who have knee injuries. They come back stronger and better with their,
just crazy because 30 years ago your career was over, right?
Yeah, right, with their robotic cadaver knee tendon that they have in there that makes you have like kind of like rookie of the year or whatever, where he has that arm with the arm injury that breaks his arm and he comes back and like throws fast. You get the robotic knee, and
what a reference.
Yeah, you know, I'm going way back with that one, but you know, you have something like that, they come back better. It's just, you know, knee injuries in certain situations aren't as bad as they used to be. Yes, you can totally shred your knee and be done, but you know, some instances you can come back better. So yeah, I mean, and if he does come back better, boy, that's good news for Michigan. I mean, that's only positive for Michigan. So
yeah, meniscus injury a little bit easier to bounce back from than other things. And yeah, just medical advances are impressive, man, that these guys, again, don't come back the same, but arguably a little bit better, right? Yep. So